Andrew Millison is the founder of OSU's Permaculture Design Program, where he has been an instructor in the Department of Horticulture since 2009. Collaborating with experts at OSU, Andrew developed an online permaculture education program with niche offerings that has evolved into a worldwide program that has served tens of thousands of students internationally. His online education work led him to multimedia storytelling. How many of you have gone online and, you've all got to go on there and see what he's done? Where he has built a global following. His popular YouTube channel boasts over 100 million video views, where he documents the most impactful ecological projects on Earth and presents them in both an artistic and technical manner. In recent years, Andrew has documented transformational land restoration projects throughout North America, Africa, Asia, and Europe. He founded the Earth Repair Fund in 2025, where he uses his videos to crowdfund for regenerative land projects. As a permaculture designer, the primary focus of Andrew's 30-year career has been water management systems. Andrew has designed and consulted on projects since the late 1990s around the U.S. and the world, specializing in large-scale water design, and we are very lucky that Andrew lives here in Corvallis, and I'm very pleased to welcome him to the podium. Please join me.
Thank you, Annette. Check, check, check. Check, check, check. Hello, hello. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, great. I was remembering back in 2008 when myself and my wife and my newborn son were looking for a new place to live, and we came and we checked out Corvallis, and we saw a flyer probably at the co-op for this Corvallis Sustainability Coalition meeting at the high school. And we came there in 2008 and we were like, wow, this is incredible. What a town. And we moved here. And so it's a real honor to be able to speak to you all here. So long later, many neighbors and friends and people that feel like family to me here. So thank you all, and thanks to Corvallis for 17 wonderful years. And I'm going to talk about fixing watersheds as how we fix the world. Okay? It's the title of this talk. And the watershed is the basis of land management. It's how nature actually organizes the landscape. Now, for some of you, like Dave here, this is review. But we need to take a minute to just understand what is the primary pattern, what's the macro pattern that we're working with right here. So the watershed basin is bounded by mountains, ridges, hills, and within that we have all of the creeks, drainages, meeting together, forming rivers. And if you actually look at the watershed pattern, the watershed basin, does it resemble something else to you? Yeah, a leaf, a tree, right? Our own vascular system. In fact, the synaptic connections in our own brain is the same pattern, dendritic branching pattern that we find within the watershed. So you might say the watershed pattern is actually the way that nature organizes the movement of nutrients and fluids in the third dimension, right? And this basis for, we're made up of this watershed pattern ourselves. We find this everywhere. Now, I'm going to have a few trivia questions throughout this talk here. And the first trivia question here is for all of you geographers. So this is actually a confluence of two waterways right outside Corvallis. Does anybody, by looking at this map, tell me what are the waterways this is the confluence of? Yes, okay. Zan Ojero, right? Your hand. Okay, and okay. Excellent. So we can look here at the confluence of Muddy Creek, and I actually use this slide all over the place, and this is actually the first crowd I think I've ever talked to where I could actually ask and get people to identify this, so I was really proud of that. But you can see there, I've highlighted what look like property boundaries, property divisions, land divisions with those little red lines where we have roadways, we have fencing, and we can see the human division of landscape there. But underneath the human division of landscape, we see this other pattern, right? It's that watershed pattern. It's that branching pattern of waterways. Okay. Now, we see this human-imposed grid in the extreme in many examples. For instance, this example right here, San Francisco, California, you might call this one of the more extreme versions of how we've actually superimposed this grid of land management over this natural watershed pattern. How many people here have been to San Francisco? Okay, so the city of cable cars, right? But what happens when we actually take the landscape and we chop it up into grids, right? So these roadways become the new water drainages. And that grid becomes the way that we superimpose our own management of water flow over this landscape, and it actually results in massive levels of dysfunction. Because you can have an urban area like this, like San Francisco, like Seattle, like Corvallis, that can actually become hydrologic deserts even in rainy areas. Because the water is not soaked in, it is now shunted down on this grid pattern. So I actually consider the fact that we've superimposed the grid on top of the watershed pattern, I actually consider this the fundamental flaw of human civilization. It's kind of like the original sin. Now, I'm sure that there's some people here that would argue with me, especially if you're following the Judeo-Christian traditions or all of that. But I would say from my permaculture perspective, the original sin is when we put the grid of property management over a non-gridded landscape. Now, we see this here in Corvallis. You can see I have the Oak Creek watershed kind of outlined in red around there, right? And so when we look at the development pattern, we see this kind of patchy mosaic of urban development. We have little blocks of forest and blocks of agriculture. Then we get up higher into the watershed. We can see we have forests, we have areas of clear cut, right? And none of the patterns that you see there seem to overtly correspond to that watershed tree, that watershed pattern. So one of the big challenges of humanity, in my opinion, is how do we reconnect land management to the patterns of the watershed, the patterns of water flow. And in this talk, I'm kind of giving you, this is my macro view of the world, and then we'll actually look at some specific projects because like Annette said, I've had the fortune of being able to travel around the world to see really some of the most inspiring land restoration projects that are happening on the planet. Okay. Now, I love this LiDAR image here. You can see Corvallis right there in yellow. And this LiDAR image, it shows the historic channels of the Willamette River. And really, when you look at this, you can see that the Willamette River is like a sinuous snake that's moving around. And we have this, we imagine that the river is in some sort of static form, but that's only because we're only seeing a tiny blip of the history of this river here. And so when we're thinking about Corvallis, when we're thinking about our position within the landscape, we have to see this continually shifting and changing waterway that we are adjacent to, in addition to the watersheds that feed it right here. Now, there was a time when the United States of America actually could have gone on a trajectory where we made our political boundaries correspond with watershed boundaries, right? So this is John Wesley Powell, right? Lake Powell. Anybody been to Lake Powell on the Colorado River in Arizona? Okay, Lake Powell is named after John Wesley Powell. So Ulysses S. Grant, who's down there, looks like a very happy gentleman. Grant was the president of the United States, and he actually sent Powell to say, how are we going to effectively settle and colonize the arid West? So Powell went, journeyed all over. He was the first Anglo person to raft down the Grand Canyon. And Powell went around and saw the obvious fact that if we developed the arid West with political boundaries that did not correspond to watershed boundaries, we were going to have water wars. It was just inevitable because there was so little water in the West. So Powell actually drew up this map of the watershed democracy and said we need to divide the states on watershed lines. Not just the states, but actually every county within the state to be divided on watershed basins, which meant that the political unit and the watershed units would be one and the same. Now, it took quite a while for Powell to get back to the east to give his findings. By that time, Grant had died, and actually, the railroad lobby crushed the idea because they wanted to more effectively commodify and make squares and rectangles so we could easily buy and sell land in the United States. So we didn't get there, but that was like another timeline that didn't happen, but we actually could be in a very different reality today. Now, of course, we can see how that worked out. The Colorado River Basin superimposed over the four corners is a really great example of how badly we can do political boundaries in relation to the watershed. Anybody knows about the Colorado River knows that the politics are really, it's a really dysfunctional system because they allocated the river at a point of a historic high point in the river flow. So we have the setup for, problems forevermore. Now, it is not just the United States, of course. Every country, right? Every country, when we look at it, we actually can see these natural divisions of landscape. So I'm going to take you on a little journey over here to India, and I'm going to talk about what I consider as one of the most inspiring and successful watershed-based land restoration projects on the planet, right? Now, India, also, the states are not divided on the watershed. So this is trivia question number 2 here. How are the states divided in India? It's a harder one. Religion. Not religion. Language, yes. Right, so India, actually, they divided the states on language groups, which is another interesting way to divide this. But in the state of Maharashtra, which is a huge state, it has about 130 million people live there. Okay, and this is Maharashtra is where Mumbai is located on the coast there. And it goes from the coast all the way into a very arid area. And they had extreme water shortages, right? So what happens is you get the monsoon rains and people would plant with the monsoons over a 3-month period. But then the rest of the year, the other 9 months are dry. So what was happening is that if those rains fail and people don't grow enough crops to have enough income, they actually have to leave, and they have to leave their villages, and then during the dry season, they go over and they have to work in the slums in Mumbai, or they have to become migrant laborers on different farms and such. And so there was this project that was developed, and this project was a contest. It is a contest between the villages in order to actually see which village could install the most amount of water harvesting structures in a 45-day period. So that's what this picture is that you're looking at right here. Because there is this Bollywood actor named Amir Khan. Anybody here know Amir Khan? Okay, very few of you. Amir Khan is like what we think of as like Tom Cruise. That's how famous Amir Khan is in India. Okay, mega famous leading man. And so Amir Khan, he was informed by traveling around and filming all these movies that there was this problem, but he also came into contact with some villages that had actually done the work to restore their watersheds. So he actually funded this, and with his fame, he got all of these massive amount of villages to start and join this contest. Now, I put this particular image up here because if you haven't ever seen a Bollywood film, this is a really good one to start with. Okay, Lagan, it's an absolute classic. And so he had, over a 4-year period, they got 8,000 villages to join this contest. Now, you can see here, you can see these water harvesting structures that are all full here, these ponds and this is what happens. This is what it actually looks like when they put these structures in. So they put these structures in place, dug by hand by the entire village, getting together in a 45-day period. And they put these structures in, and then the monsoons come, fill up the structures, and then that water actually soaks down into the ground and creates a reservoir of water, an aquifer underneath the ground. And then they have water underground, which they can pump out during the dry season to then grow crops. So it basically has doubled their income, doubled their productivity. And once you get a few seasons, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, and you get all this rain coming in and it's soaking and it's charging up that aquifer, you actually get a permanent water table that has been built under there. So these villages have literally gone, it's mind-blowing, right? These villages have literally gone from people needing to leave and go to the slums to work during the dry season to now people are prosperous, right? And when you think of like 8,000 villages, each village has about 2,000 people on average. So that's 16 million people that were affected by this one project, right? And as well, each project has about 1,000 hectares, which is about 2,500 acres as part of their land area. So, you do the math, I'm not sure, right? That's a lot of ground that has been taken from a desertified landscape into a lush landscape, right? And so it's not just agriculture, it's also restoring degraded lands, okay? And then ultimately groundwater recharge. It's really fascinating. I don't know how many people here have been to India and gone around, seen especially some of these rural areas. All of the wells are hand dug. So it's not like here where, we'll come, drill this well and you can never really see the water. You just know that the pump is pumping water. Because the wells there are hand dug, you can actually look down and the groundwater table is very evident. So you tour around these villages and you see the groundwater table is right there below the surface. So they actually are very tuned in and they can monitor the groundwater levels as the year goes by. So groundwater recharge is really the basis. You can see these green fields growing up next door there. And then along with that comes the economic revitalization. So suddenly people can send their kids to school, send their kids to college, build a new house, right? Build like better roads. Now, there's a flip side that's interesting as well. I asked this one farmer, I was like, wow, so he was talking about, well, my one kid is studying computer science, my other kid's studying to be a doctor, and I was like, oh wow, do any of your kids want to be farmers now? And he was like, no, my kids actually don't want to be farmers now. So, everything has its different sides to it, right? So this is me taking a picture of the map of their village grounds in the center of the village. This is a mural that this one village, Pimpri Jalson, painted on the wall. Now, every little child, every grandmother, everybody in the village now understands how the village was saved through watershed restoration, right? So the literacy has gone into a societal level because of the work that they all collectively did. But here's the clincher, and this is where we here are at such a disadvantage, because these villages are all ancient. They have been in the locations that they have been in since long before anybody can actually even remember. And so they were settled and the areas were defined for those villages when people were still working with the logic of nature. So the village boundaries correspond to the watershed boundaries, right? This is what we've been talking about. The political boundaries, the decision-making boundaries of the population are also the watershed boundaries, which are the natural divisions of landscape. So it makes it really easy. All they had to do was decide to restore the boundary of their area, and it happened to also be the watershed, right? So this is where that grid I was talking about of property management, where it really makes things more complicated for us here, okay? Now, if you're interested in seeing more, I've visited 6 of these villages out of the 8,000. I've got to say, of those 8,000 villages, 1,000 of them completely fixed their water problems 100%, to the level where they were then brought into the next level of the contest. So 7,000 villages did some level. But I visited 6 of the villages that had completely fixed their watershed. So you could go on my YouTube channel and you can watch those videos. So let's jump over now from India to some place that may be a little bit more familiar with everybody, and we're going to go to Hawaii, right? Now, Hawaii's Ahupua'a system. This is a system that is managing the landscape from the top of the mountain all the way down into the ocean. How many people here have been to Hawaii? I expect a lot of hands there. Yeah. So Hawaii, and like a lot of tropical islands, you have a mountain chain in the middle, and it basically goes down, and then you get to the coastline. So the watershed is not very obscure. You can easily see the clouds hitting the mountains, and then the streams going through the fields, and then coming out into the ocean. So the Ahupua'a is the traditional Hawaiian system, where the land management unit was exactly corresponding to that watershed. Okay, and it's designed around responsibility, community, and ecology. Now, you can see here I outlined this one small watershed right here. This is Oahu. So this is Honolulu right here, and Pearl Harbor is right here. So right over there on the wet side, there's this one watershed. And this is where the native Hawaiians live, are in most densely populated, on the most densely populated island. So that's the watershed that we're going to look at here for this next example of hydrologic restoration. So there is this group of people, of native Hawaiians, who realized that they had no land dedicated, no sovereign native Hawaiian land on the entire island chain. And so they actually camped out on the beach down in Waimanalo. They camped out and they got people, all the homeless Hawaiian people from all over the islands, everybody came, and also activists, and they camped out on the beach, and they stayed there for about 1.5 years. And the government would arrest a whole bunch of people, they're like, sure, fill the jails. And they'd come out, and it just kept growing and growing. And finally, the government they were just like, we are so fed up with this. How about this? We will give you some land up near the base of the mountain there. We will give you like a little piece of land up there, kind of where all the mosquitoes are, and like, will you just go up there and be quiet and not bother the tourists anymore on the beach, right? And so they said, sure, they wanted land to actually have sovereign indigenous land. And so they took that land there, and over time, they started to actually transform the land. Now, they didn't have to come up with a design, because it turned out that underneath the forest of invasive plants, right? Hawaii is like 99 point something % exotic invasive species. It's one of the most devastated native ecosystems on the planet is Hawaii. I'm not sure if you know that. So what they found is when they started uncovering underneath these trees, they found the old terraces that their ancestors had actually had there. That was their old food system. And so they have now started to restore this Ahupua'a system. right? Managing the forest up from the top there and putting in uncovering and putting in these terraces here and growing loey, which is their staple crop, and inviting people from all over the islands, community, to come and actually work together and rebuild the system. Cultural restoration, actually restore the culture and the ecology and the agricultural system, right? So this is a good example of when we think of like a developed nation like the United States, of how we can actually still go with building community and get this watershed pattern put back into place, okay? And along with the agricultural revitalization, along with the cultural revitalization, it also creates an economic restoration. Because when you get people starting to work together and when they start to put these patterns in place, there is a lot of prosperity that comes because the agricultural system is in harmony with the ecological system. So yields are high. And so we've actually, through the Earth Repair Fund, which is my philanthropic organization, we've actually crowdfunded over $45,000 for this restoration project to date. And thank you. And if you actually go and see these videos here that are on my channel, you are able to support this project as well. So, how does this apply to our beautiful Corvallis, right? We have some really incredible examples. In fact, we have some things working for us that are so low maintenance for us that all we really have to do is just let it happen, right? Do we have any Beavers fans here? I think that the fact that OSU, the fact that we are like, go Beavs, and we get tens of thousands of people chanting together about the Beavers, I mean, this is like a really strong medicine animal for us here, you know? So some of it's just letting the beavers be. I mean, how easy is that for restoring a watershed, right? That's one thing. And then, you know, like what the water action team here, what Dave showed us with restoring riparian corridors, replanting these vital waterways. I mean, a lot of riparian plants, willows, you just stick them in the ground and they grow, right? So, I mean, we have some incredibly easy solutions here to take advantage of. Now, one thing that's not too easy, though, is redesigning industrial monoculture forestry. This is kind of tricky. And I mean, when you look at this, I just was like, grab this satellite image. When we talk about superimposing this grid of land management over a non-gridded landscape, it's not good out there when we look at the grid of forest management. It makes no ecological sense. And so I'm not, you know, we only have about 3 minutes left, so I'm not gonna present my plan for reimagining industrial monoculture forestry here, but I will say that, you know, there's a lot of good stuff out there. Some things like agroforestry, rotational grazing, silvopasture, places that we actually plant trees and mix trees in with agricultural systems. There's a lot of really great examples out there that we could use here to reimagine farming and forestry together, right? And then we have urban stormwater management. Now this is something that, I mean, if anybody's ever seen Portland, driven around there, we see the green streets where, you know, we have some of this in Corvallis, but in Portland, there's a massive amount of these sunken stormwater basins where the water from the roads are collecting down in there, they're soaking in and growing, I mean, hopefully native plants, wetland plants, although don't seem very strict about it there. Yeah. So we have urban stormwater management. And then of course we have, which, you know, a lot of the permaculture method is, I'm sorry my text kind of went away there, but it says like the mosaic of urban homestead development. So this is my house here in Southtown. So even on each one of your own lots, to actually be harvesting, soaking in water is doing a great benefit to the overall watershed. Because when I think about probably how many different properties here collectively between the people here, you're talking about a lot of ground that could be absorbing water as opposed to draining water, right? And so when we think about the scale of our Oak Creek watershed and the scale of the other creeks in our Corvallis watersheds, and we think about the effect that each person here can make in their own property, as well as some of the larger scale things like restoring riparian zones and doing urban stormwater management on the streets, we actually can have a huge effect. We really can here. So my takeaway messages, first off, the fundamental flaw of civilization is superimposing this grid of land management over the watershed pattern. You may have heard it here first. I don't know. Now you know. You can never unhear it. Now, there are huge advantages to working within an intact watershed basin like we see in India. If the city of Corvallis controlled the watershed that we influence here, all we have to do is vote in watershed-based mayor, watershed county commissioners, and we would be on our way, right? So we're watching you, right? Yeah. And now, just like this is the example, there is great power in collective effort and community cohesion, right? It cannot be underestimated. And there are a great diversity of strategies for rural, suburban, and urban landscapes. We have all of this at our fingertips. All we need to do really is decide to do it. And I believe that actually the people in this room, there's enough decision-making power in this room that we could actually make a huge difference on our watersheds if we dedicate ourselves to it. Yeah. So, and we could be one of these stories that the world would want to see and follow. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I believe I'm out of time. So, there's, if you want to see some of these videos and many more from around the world, you can go to youtube.com/amillison. There's our Oregon State University permaculture classes, Earth Repair Fund. Thank you so much for all the good work that you do here in this town. Thank you.